My name is Ed Kornfield. I'm one of the board members of the Safety Foundation. I'm going to be talking about sport pilot privileges today. Some of the stuff, I know Petra talked about that earlier. I'm going to try to build on what she said. And we're also going to talk a little bit about basic med, which is something she mentioned. I'll try not to say anything that's different from what she said, but I'll try to build on it a little bit. Rick Henry from the local EAA chapter 42 is probably listening online. He was instrumental in helping me do this slideshow. Together we created, so I want to thank him. He did a great job. So with that, we'll get started. But the first thing I want to talk about, maybe just to do a safety minute, which is something a lot of meetings in the past I've been involved with. We've done a safety minute, just to be thinking about something, not necessarily the topic, but additional safety. So 2 words, muscle memory. And the definition is the ability to reproduce a particular movement without conscious thought, acquired as a result of frequent repetition of that movement. I know, I'm sure you guys have all rented vehicles. When you first get into the car, you're fumbling around for the seat belt, figure out where it is. They're not all standard. And when you get out of the car, same thing, you're looking for the release. But also maybe looking for the door handle. Imagine if you were in an airplane, maybe your first flight as a passenger in somebody's airplane, had to get out, don't know where the door handle is. Maybe you're in a float plane that just went upside down in the water. So what I'm just saying is think about when you have passengers in your airplane as a pilot, have them, show them the seatbelt obviously, have them buckle it, unbuckle it, and buckle it again. So you've got muscle memory. So they, at least that, the first time they get out, less likely that they're fumbling around. The other thing is, I don't know if anybody recognizes this. I know the picture's not very good, but let's say you're in, this is in a vehicle, by the way, it's a car, and that happens to be the release to get out of the car. And in a dark area, you can't find it. The first time, this was an Uber that I took the other day, and it's a Tesla, by the way. And it's just a little button. By the way, that if you lose power in the car, you have to go to the emergency release, which is even harder to find. So again, the whole idea is for you to create some muscle memory with your passenger. Maybe they've never flown in your airplane before, maybe they've never flown before, but just have them, you know, at least put their hand on the door handle to get out, maybe even operate it. You may not want them to do that unless it's an emergency, but at least you're creating. Now this one, some of you might recognize this as a Cessna 206. If the flaps are down, guess what? You can't open the front right-hand side cargo door. You can't open the back one, but somebody has to shown you how to do it. So again, that muscle memory thing, just have somebody, if nothing else, at least have them touch the lever. It's a red lever on the front of the door, and so that they could go right to it. It's a lot more. So here's that Tesla thing, by the way. A little more obvious, but still, to get out of that thing, you know, you're kind of fumbling around because it's not something you're used to. Cessna 180. If you notice the door handle on the left-hand side by the pilot, it's behind the seat. So, and the same thing on the right-hand side. The question is, does it go up or does it go down? So, like I'm saying, just have somebody touch it. You may not want to operate it, but at least have them, you know, describe it, what to do. And this one is a Helio Courier, non-standard, you know, a little different standard for the Helio, but you might reach up here and pull this, which is just an armrest. This actually opens the window. So just something to think about. You know, we're going to get into the float plane season. You're going to be flying a lot more. We have some training when all kids come up. So, let's get into our presentation of Mosaic. So imagine your Cessna 180, and imagine flying this on just using a driver's license. You guys can still hear me in the back, right? Again, without a medical, just using driver's license. Mosaic stands for Modernization of Special Airworthiness Certification. And what is that? You know, how does that concern me? Well, you know, we're all getting older. Maybe we're having concerns about passing next flight physical, as Petra talked about. maybe it's just getting expensive. You know, some of them are upwards from $2,500 up for every year. And so now you have an alternative with Mosaic. So it expands the sport pilot privileges and to a much greater range of airplanes than before. So back in 2004, when they came out with the LSA, the Light Sport Aircraft Rules, so now we've overhauled that to Mosaic. It takes off on that, but it changes them pretty drastically. And it expands the list of aircraft that we can fly, using only a driver's license. So, but also just as I think Petra noted, you can do this not just as a sport pilot, but also with, it says sport pilot and higher. So you can do it with a private, commercial, or ATP. You can fly using sport pilot privileges under those certificates as well. These are the old LSA rules. Remember, they've been superseded by Mosaic. They used to have a max weight of 1,320 for a land plane, 1,430 for seaplanes, and there was a max speed, level flight, max stall speed of 45 knots, calibrated airspeed. Notice these are calibrated. We're going to talk about that a little bit further down in the next few slides. But that's an important, thing to note. Max of 2 seats, power plant max 1, and then landing gear fixed and fixed pitch prop. So that's going to be different in Mosaic as well. So these things are no longer in effect, old LSA rules. So this is the final rule for Mosaic. It came out in October 22nd of 2025, just 6 months ago. And the LSA category aircraft certification will become effective July 24 of 2026, this year, a couple months. Notice that, how about that? So notice that they're separated out. We're going to talk about that because they're actually 2 separate things now. It's not just under the LSA rules. You know, you have to think sport pilot as one, the flying side, and then the certification side is the aircraft LSA. So hold on a second. Oh yeah, we're not going to be talking about, some of the things we won't be talking about is hot air balloons, gliders, lighter than air, and rotorcraft. I'm not going to talk about that, and I won't talk about the certification rules for LSA. That's not coming out until July. And then also the maintenance rules, which are a little bit different. You know, before you could, if you had to be a repairman for a, let's say a home built light sport, you had to have built it at least 51%. So things are going to be changing a little bit, but not really. That's not really the purpose of this today. So I'm assuming that most of you are private or better pilots. You know, there's no sport pilots. Anybody just sport pilot in here? Recreational? You are? Okay. But for the most part, stuff we're talking about, you can use your, on your pilot certificate, your current one, private, commercial, or ATP, and you can fly under sport pilot privileges. You have to remember that. So in today's discussion, we're going to be talking about, again, the difference between sport pilot and LSA. There's 2 separate categories. Sport pilot privileges, using only a driver's license, and what it takes to be, we're going to touch briefly on what it takes to become a sport pilot in as little as 20 hours. A sport pilot instructor, some medical options, basic net in a nutshell. Just to review, because Petra already talked about that. Not getting denied, that she touched on that as well, and that's important. I think Brent also mentioned that. And medical deficiencies. Okay, so as I started to say before, you need to think about them as 2 completely different meanings, 2 different subjects. You've got the sport pilot, generally the pilot privileges, and the LSA rules for aircraft certification. And that's really important, is to separate the 2 out. That's what this Mosaic is intended to do, to separate the ones out. Let's see. Okay, so sport pilots, so the FARs are 61-315 and 61-316, and that's for sport pilot privileges, not LSA rules, but sport pilot privileges. And I'll just point out too that, so this thing, this whole presentation is going to be online at our Safety Foundation, the AASFonline.org, our website, and also the EAA Chapter 42 has a website, and it's going to be on both. These numbers that you're going to see over here are links to specific FARs that you can go right to and see, like say 315 for instance, 61-315. Click on the link, it's online, and you'll be able to go right to the FAR. It'll be a lot easier. So yeah, we're going to talk about this 59 rule, 59K rule, 59 knots. It's important to note that, for instance, a 172 is not an LSA. Back in the day when they had the old LSA rules, some of the airplanes that qualified, maybe a J3 or some of the aircraft, but the 172, for instance, one of the ones that is approved, that qualifies now to be flown as under sport pilot privileges, still retains a standard airworthiness certificate that doesn't change, and all the requirements for that still is the same. You have to do an annual or $100 if you use it for any kind of commercial stuff, which actually cannot do when you're under sport pilot. But still, you need to do an annual, and still retains. You don't change the airworthiness certificate. It's still the same way from certification. Everybody understand that, by the way? Yeah. Sport pilot privileges. So let's talk about the 59 knot calibrated airspeed rule, BS1, which is, BS1 is flaps up, right, clean configuration, as opposed to BSO. Petra had a slide on there that said 60, I don't know if you saw that, 61 knots is what she said. That's actually certification rule for the light sport aircraft, the certification, and that's actually 61 knots, calibrated airspeed, flaps down with BSO. So this is the number you really have to remember. If the airplane is, if you can show that that airplane has a 59 knot stall speed with the flaps up, calibrated, and we'll talk about the difference shortly. But then that's part of the determination to be able to fly under sport pilot privileges. Okay. Max seat of certification is 4. So let's say you get an airplane that has 4 seats in it, but under certification, it had 6 in there to begin with. But when you bought it, it only had 4. It doesn't count. It's at certification. When the airplane was certified, we're actually going to go into a slide and show you how to find that, where to find that. Max number of passengers is 1 plus the pilot, so that's 2 total in the airplane. So you've got 4 seats, but two total people. VFR only, not below 3 statute miles, visibility. And we've got another slide that talks about, for instance, what about special VFR? Can you come in to Anchorage, let's say to Merrill Field, using sport pilot privileges in your Cessna 180, for instance, under special? Anybody can figure that out? So what happens is, okay, so let's say you're 902. Can you come in?
No.
No? Okay, got that. What if it's 903?
No.
Think about it. 3 miles, all it says is 3 mile statute visibility. So 903 is still, you still have to get a special to get in, but you maintain, you have that 3 miles. It doesn't talk about sealing. Nowhere in the rule does it talk about sealing. So yes you can. That would be, let's say in Bethel, you could have 10 days straight of 510. And you could fly around all day long in sport pilot. Of course, you still have to get your special, special VFR permission to get in. You have to maintain visual reference to the surface, so no VFR over the top. Can't do that. Even if you have holes ahead or something, as long you always have to be able to see the surface. And your max altitude is 10,000 feet mean sea level. or 2,000 feet above the ground, whichever is higher. So can you take your visiting friends or relative up to see Denali? Can you do that? If you can maintain, you can stay within these parameters, you can do that under sport pilot with just using the driver's license, sport pilot privileges. No towing, and that means no towing of other aircraft like in gliders, and no towing of banners. So you can't do that. And you can't do it, no furtherance of business or for compensation or hire. So we added the business in there, you know, their compensation or hire. So some businesses will have their corporate airplane, for instance, whatever it is, 180, who knows, aircraft. And so you can't use sport pilots, fly it as under sport pilot privileges with those two, if it's in furtherance of a business or compensation or hire. So you really can't fly at night. It says requires an endorsement and either basic med or third class. So, you know, you can fly sport pilot, but then you've got to have basic med or third class. And in your case, most of you guys already have a private or better, so it really doesn't, there's no advantage there. And now you get into, you can fly a retractable gear airplane, but it needs an endorsement, which if you're commercial, you probably already have, or ATP, you're private, you may have that already. Controllable pitch prop, again, requires an endorsement, but again, if you have a private or better, you probably already have that, you may already have that. If not, you have to have an endorsement from an instructor. And here's the tower and airports, class B, C, or D. Again, remember these numbers. If you clicked on that, if you were online, it would go right to the regulation, in this case 61,325. And so it requires an endorsement, which when you got your pilot's license, private or better, you would have had that. So, and that's for tower and airports. By the way, if you guys, I didn't see you writing it down, you know, you could just take an iPhone picture of the screen too as well. But this will be on the live for you. Yeah, this one is just, you can look this up yourself, 61303, this kind of talks about, you know, the permission, you know, to use driver's license with just a sport pilot. And the next one, 59 knot rule. Okay, so we kind of talked about the 59 knot rule. This just basically reinforces it. That's from October 22nd, 2025. And so that, yeah, the rule allows you to operate a sport pilot certificate or above. So that's private, commercial, or ATP with, as long as you've got an airplane, as long as you're operating an airplane VS1, which is flaps out 59 knots, calibrated airspeed. Definition of calibrated airspeed. So it's the indicated speed of an aircraft corrected for position and instrument error. Calibrated airspeed is equal to true airspeed in standard atmosphere at sea level. And of course, indicated airspeed is what you see on your instrument, but calibrated is corrected for the error, installation error. So that's what you have to go by, not what you see, but what somebody's made a determination for stall speed. And the manufacturer would have made that, and it got approved by the FAA. Let's see. Oh yeah, this is talking about sport pilot, and since it meets the following. So right, it's since certification. So in other words, let's say you have an airplane. Let's say you've got your Super Cub, or well, let's say it's an airplane that has a calibrated airspeed stall clean over 59 knots, but you put some VGs on the airplane, and you've got some other leading edge devices or whatever, and so you get your stall speed much lower, but it doesn't count. It talks about original certification, since it's certification. So how it was certified, not how it was altered after the fact. And maximum seating of 4. So if you don't remember anything else from this presentation, just remember 59 knots, calibrated airspeed, and a maximum seating of 4 persons, okay? Of which you can only fly 2. That's for sport pilot privileges, okay? I'm flying on that. And your driver's license, you may have a restriction on there to where you have to wear required lenses, corrective lenses, okay. I think on the, some of the FAA medicals, they'll say either, required to wear glasses or have them available. And, this one is basically, I think, driver's license, I don't know the other restrictions, but most of the time I just see, just must wear corrective lenses. I don't think you'll ever see where it says you just have to have them available. Let's see, this one is, yeah, this goes back to the original certification, so you can't just remove the seats. If you have a six-place airplane and you only have 4 seats because that's how you bought it, it doesn't count. It has to be original certification, and again, so we're really just rehashing the same thing over and over again. Maximum 4 seats, capacity of 4 seats, and you can only fly 2 people, yourself and another person. Here's some of the possible airplanes that can be flown under sport pilot privileges. You notice that there's a lot of the Cessnas, and this isn't the entire list. The FAA came out with under light sport back in 2006 and gave you kind of a list of some airplanes, but they haven't done it for this, so you have to make your own determination. And so you've got, here's a Cessna 180, but not all of them, it says some models, okay? And you've got some Cherokees, Piper, Super Cub, of course, pretty common airplane. That's an easy one. Some of the RVs, possibly the others too, but Champ, Aircrew, Luscombe, several models of all, and then the others. How do you know if yours is going to qualify? Well, let's see. So where do you go to find out the maximum number of seats? This is a type certificate data sheet for the Cessna 180, all of them actually. And this one is a 1952 4-place cabin landed monoplane. And so this one does qualify for that side of the rule, right? But how do we know about the 59 not calibrated airspeed? Well, we're gonna find that one out also.
Yeah.
Somebody, go ahead.
Yeah. And I kind of missed what you're talking about there.
This one?
Yeah, on the.
Okay, type certificate data sheet from the FAA for your airplane, for let's
So
say.
it's got the kiddie seat.
Sorry?
You can put the kiddie seat behind the back seat, which would make it a 6-place airplane.
Okay, all right, well, let me see if I can get to that on the next slide, all right? Okay, but that's a good thought. Okay, let's see if I can get to that. All right, so here's a newer, so this is part of the type certificate data sheet for the models 180 Charlie, Delta, Echo, and Foxtrot, right? And now we've got G and H. Look what we've got here, 6th place, all right? So back in about 1964, some of you guys that know Cessna 180s, you notice that the fuselage expanded a little bit to be similar to the 185. And actually, if you look at it, you can see that the early 180s had 2 side windows, and the newer ones have 3, which is the same as the 185 fuselage. Am I kind of getting to your answer there?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So anyway, so now you've got an airplane with 6 seats. So guess what? This one doesn't qualify. So if you have a 180 that fits this model, he's right up here. Now we only have 1/2 of this, so we've got the seating, right? But you can't do it with the newer ones, anything a G or an H, because it's got 6 seats. And that's really kind of even if you bought it with only 4 seats, you got to look at the original type certificate data sheet. Okay, so how do we determine the stall speed, the 59 knot rule, right? This one's for a 1963 Cessna 180. Owner's manual, we go to the stall speed power off, gross weight, flaps up, right, VS1. 65, well, that's not gonna work, is it? Let's see, speeds are in miles an hour, calibrated airspeed, that's what you're looking for, right there. And so, if you do the math, which I've done for you, by the way, 65 miles an hour, equates to 56 knots calibrated airspeed. Does it qualify? No. Early model 180, you can use it under sport pilot privileges. We're gonna get to what you can do with it in just a minute. Take a look over here. And this is a correction table between indicated and calibrated. I just want you to see, like, right around your cruise airspeed, they're pretty close, right? 100 and 100, this one's 118, this is 2 miles an hour difference. When you start getting down into the stall regime here, you've got 8-mile-an-hour difference. You see that? So, and then at the top, you're also, so this is the most accurate here. So you can't just go to for instance, there's some of the older books that won't have calibrated airspeed in there. And so you can't necessarily just go and say, well, it's indicated it's gonna be really close. You have to make some kind of a determination, right? Here's another one, so Mooney, just as an example. So we've got the type certificate data sheet, we've got 4 places, so we're good there, okay? And then, so here's the owner's manual. This is one of the ones I was talking about, where the only thing I could find in there was indicated airspeed miles an hour, and it's 67, which is 58 knots, and that would allow you to use that airplane under sport pilot privileges, but you really don't know what the calibrated airspeed is. And let's go back to that one. Notice that indicated is 60, calibrated is 68, so it's actually higher, and oftentimes it's lower, but in this case it's higher. So you just really don't know. So you have to make that determination. Here's a newer Mooney M20J, and if you look, this one actually has, here we go, so this is, okay, flaps up, gross weight, knots calibrated 59, so would that work?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Indicated, see, this one is actually, the indicated is gonna be 61, but it's gonna be lower than the calibrated, so just something to think about. This one, I could definitely prove to an AFA inspector on a ram check that my airplane qualifies for me to fly it as a sport pilot. Here we go, getting ready for a ram check. So, this is pretty new, so don't expect, and no offense to the FAA, but don't expect every inspector to be really up to speed on all this stuff. They're still learning just like we are. And so you probably want to be a little bit more ready to answer some questions. Let's say you get stopped in Merrill Field. You just came in and it's 902, 900 foot out ceiling, 2 miles visibility. You just landed and you say, I'm going to be flying. Can you do that legally, by the way? Sport pilot? No, you can't. But anyway, let's say you come in, it's a VFR, beautiful VFR day. You come in, you get a ram check. So you want to be able to show that you qualify. I would say my recommendation to you is just have a copy of the type certificate data sheet and the owner's manual, BOH, available, and know where to find information. You can show it to him, because he'll ask you, say, let me see your pilot's license and your medical, and you say, well, I don't have a medical. And, what? So it's Cessna 180, what do you mean? So, if you can show him that, I think you'll stop any further conversation right there. You also have to have, obviously, a valid driver's license in your possession, and you obviously make sure you comply with all the rules, which is the, right, if it's in a special, you have to have 3 months. Okay. See, I think that we've covered that pretty well. Becoming a sport pilot, really, it's basically half the hours, 20 hours, as opposed to 40 for private, and a lot less cost. Although, in talking to some people, I just talked to the EAA in Oshkosh the other day, and they were saying that realistic averages for sport pilot, they were saying about 40, 45 hours, and they were saying more like 60 to 80 hours for private. So even though you can get it in as little as 40, depends on the complexity of the airspace too. If you're operating out of Willow, for instance, and training somebody as opposed to Merrill Field, it's going to be a lot longer. It'll take more time here because of the complexity. Let's see, and obviously the difference in the number of solo hours and all that. I think it's what is it? Private is 40 hours total, 20 hours of dual, 10 hours of solo, 3 hours cross country, 3 hours at night, 3 hours of instrument. So you're going to get more. That's one of the reasons you need those extra sign-offs, the endorsements under sport pilot that you wouldn't get if you had a sport pilot's license. And the instructor, again, you're going from 250 hours to 150, and of course you don't need a commercial, and no instrument rating. Make sure I covered all my notes here. You can actually, so you can give, now the FAA allows you as a sport pilot instructor to charge for instruction. So that's the only time with using your sport pilot certificate or operating under sport pilot, under the sport pilot rules that you can get paid for it as an instructor. Let's see, sport pilots, here's just some of the FRs that govern that, 303, the 315 that I talked about, the 59 knot rule, 316, and again, there's those links, if you go online, you'll be able to find that. Here's just some of the information, advisory circulars around. This one I think is a good one. This is a Sport Pilot Advisory Circular AEC 61-146. And that's a good one to take a look at the practical test standards. So, okay. This is getting into Petra's area, but this is more likely, just all I really want to do is talk about some of the alternatives. You've got, these are just some of the FARs again, that, for special issuance, some of these other ones. She had a good website that actually listed where you can go right to the, I can't remember exactly the term, but you can see what she sees when she goes to issue a medical certificate, what qualifies and what doesn't qualify. If you have a condition that might prohibit you from getting a class 3 or better medical, she can look it up. You can also go online and look it up too. I thought that was a pretty good way. Okay, let's just take a look at this quickly for comparison's sake. Again, you've got third class medical down here. Let's just say you're a private pilot, basic med, and as she said, and I think you guys know that now, that you can have both basic med and your class medical, class 1, 2, or 3 at the same time, which is, I think that's a huge value. Basic med here, and then your driver's license. So let's just go across. So IFR, yeah, you can do that. No, you can't under sport pilot privileges. Visibility, 91 rules for those two, and guess what? 3 miles here. Special VFR, we talked about not less than 3 miles. They don't talk about the ceiling. They talk, it could be 103, 100-foot ceiling, or maybe not. That's probably pretty low, but some places like Kotzebue, you might be flying around with that. So nighttime, you really know is the answer. You need a basic med but if you guys are already private pilots, that doesn't really affect you at all. Remember, we've got passengers. You can have 1 passenger, but the limit is 4. Going over to basic med, not to confuse you guys, but basic med, you can have an airplane seating of 7, so it's basically 6 passengers plus the pilot. So like I say, I don't want to confuse you, but you really need to be thinking about this. That's the purpose of this talk, is sport pilot. Basic med is up to 18,000, so you can't fly in Class A airspace. And sport pilot is privileges is 10,000 feet above sea level or 2,000 feet above ground, whichever is higher. Now they've taken away that weight limit that you saw in LSA, and it's not specified. So only the 2 things are the seating capacity and the stall speed, clean, which I can't say that enough. That's really the only criteria, basically. They moved the basic med from 6,000 pounds up to 12.5, which is pretty high. That's like, well, except for the seating, it's like a Twin Otter King Air. And then the 59 knot rule, calibrated airspeed, no limit for the other 2. Petra's kind of touched on this, but you can't really fly through Canada on either one of those. But Bahamas and not sure about Mexico for a sport pilot, but apparently the Bahamas is a yes. And then of course these are the other limitations. Petra talked about the basic med, the certificate, let's see, this is the AOPA certificate that you get issued after you take the online. So 48 months, as she said, your physician, I think that, it has to be a state licensed physician. I think they have to have, I guess I'm not entirely sure if they have to have permission to do it or not, but, anyway, most of your, if they want to do it, most of your, family docs can probably do it. And some choose not to do it at all. And then you gotta take this test, to, the AOP test board, and she mentioned, I think, one of the other clinics had it as well. And then you can fly under, basic med rules. Let's see. So, yeah, this is just basically from that chart, same thing, 12,000 pounds, this is the basic med, 6 passengers, so total of 7, 6 plus the pilot. Let's see, oh yeah, 18,000 feet. Outside the United States is not allowed except for the particular country, and not exceeding 250 knots. And you need to have the medical checklist, which is a pretty broad checklist, by the way. That I think I have a picture of it somewhere. Anyway, but yeah, and then the course. Yeah, it's a pretty broad checklist. Okay, so. Basic med limitations, so you have to have still have to have a driver's license. Can't carry more than 7 passengers, 12.5, and you cannot be a transport category aircraft or rotorcraft. 18,000 feet, can't fly above, not in a foreign country except permission, 250 knots max, and remember that medical checklist. Exam checklist, and then required course certificate. You put it in your logbook, or at least someplace where you can get to it if you need to. Yeah, here's that form right here, and it's pretty general, kind of yes, no answers. Let's see. These are just, I think one of these is the same one that Petra came up with. This one right here, maybe, or at least it's a similar one. And I said that you can have both basic med and first class. Or any class at the same time, first, second, and third class, which, yeah. Okay, the denial part, right? If you, you can't get basic med if you've, let's see, most recent, you have to have had at least a certificate, third class or better, since before, let's see, maybe expired, okay, so I think you have to have had one at least since 2006. Could be expired, suspended, it cannot be suspended or revoked. She talked about that as well. And you could have an authorization for special issuance, but again, that can't be withdrawn or taken away from you. So any problems with a class, first, second, or third class, and you're gonna have to deal with that before you get a basic med. That's basically it. So it cannot have been denied. And person must, let's see, at least found eligible at least for the third class medical certificate. And if you've applied, you can't have been turned down. So, and you can't have been suspended, revoked, or withdrawn. Let's see, this is the part about lying that I think Brent touched on. And actually, hold on a second, I think that's the next slide. What is not lying? Well, yeah, this one and the next. So your medic specs, I don't think they've talked about that, but it's, you can keep it in the system for 30 days to complete it. So, you've got up to 30 days to complete it once you start. And then once you submit, then you've got 60 days to complete it with the physician, the examiner. And if after 60 days, nothing happens, then it gets deleted from the system. I think Rick put on here that if you, that seems like a lot of time to wait, but if you decide that you've got an error in there and you don't want to submit it, or you don't want to continue and have the physician examine you, it'll get deleted from the system after 60 days. Seems like a long time to wait, but, and then anything that's submitted and completed is going to be a permanent record, so it's in there forever. Let's see, medical deficiency, this kind of talks about anything in class. Okay, so Yeah, so if it requires a medical certificate, this is kind of an important note. Your first, but this is your class, you know, 1, 2, or 3, any operations that require that, say private or better, and you're unable to meet the requirements of the medical certificate at any time, then it voids out the medical, so you really can't fly if you have a problem, a medical problem that comes up, even between, flight physicals. Not that anybody does that, but you know, that's the rule. So, but if you're just using your driver's license, if you operations that do not require a medical certificate, you have to be you have to be able to operate the aircraft in a safe manner. So you can see the difference. One is be able to operate in a safe manner, and the other one is to be able to meet the original certification for that particular medical certificate. Everybody kind of understand that? I think that's pretty important. So basically, you have to self-assess on both, but this one is basically, as long as you can fly the airplane in a safe manner, you can fly under sport pilot privileges. I think this basically says the same thing, yeah. Basically meet the requirements of the certificate for if you need a medical. If you don't need a medical, if you're using your driver's license, all you need to do is be able to operate in a safe manner. Here's just a couple of other things. Maybe this was the guide that I was talking about before, but these are actually pretty good. This one, I think you need a membership for the AOPA, but it does give you can type in a medication, and it'll tell you what you're allowed to do with it or not, as far as the FAA is concerned. You know, some of those you might have to wait and get some, you know, for a track record. Say you start a medication that makes you dizzy, you have to wait, I don't know how many days, you know, maybe up to 30 days to make sure that you stabilize under that before they'll allow you to fly with that. And I think that's it for my talk. These are just some of the, again, let's see, these also are links. They're just some of the, here's the website, by the way. I'll put that up in the next couple slides. But these are just some of the links that you might get some more information. And then there it is right there posting. That's the EAA link, and then our link for the Safety Foundation. And I believe that's it. Any questions? Great.
Kind of a strange question, but does the sport pilot only fall under single engine, or can you also operate a multi-engine?
I was hoping nobody would ask that. So, something I didn't say, but you know, when you're saying one, so here's the deal. So remember, we're gonna separate out the sport pilot privileges from the LSA rules, okay? And so, there are gonna be some LSA airplanes that you're not gonna be able to fly with just a sport pilot license, okay, certificate. And the multi-engine thing, I'm kind of unclear about that.
Got it. Okay.
I'll tell you though, what I know is that the sport pilot PTS, the practical test standards, only go single engine land, single engine sea. So there's no mention of multi-engine land.
Got it.
Okay. So, but I think that I think you're going to be able to fly a multi-engine LSA, but not under sport pilot privileges. Okay, and that's just my. Don't quote me on that. I might be making that stuff up, but it makes sense. So hopefully that kind of answered your question a bit. Anybody else? Henry.
Yeah, you had a slide on the requirements for a new pilot to qualify under the sport pilot rules. What about a pilot that has a private or commercial certificate?
So that's
already.
Yeah, that's the whole concept of flying under sport pilot privileges. So as long as you meet those, hold on a second, let me see if I can find it quickly. So yeah, you can fly under the privileges for sport piloting for anything above sport pilot, private, commercial, or ATP. But so you've already got. Hold on, let me see if I can find that.
Oh, you went past them.
Can I go past it?
There.
Right there, okay, yeah. But if you've got, a private, let's say you just talk about a private pilot, you've already got these things and you've got more than these, so yes, you can fly under sport pilot privileges as long as your airplane qualifies. So, am I answering your question?
Yeah, I think so, but do you need any kind of a logbook endorsement or anything else, or you're good to go?
What, somebody should.
Well, you said something about endorsements like Class Delta airspace endorsement.
but
As a
if
private
you're-
pilot, you typically wouldn't have that endorsement.
The private pilot? Oh, you would have that would be part of your, you would have gone to.
Part of your training, yeah, but you don't have a logbook endorsement, but when sport
Oh, I see
pilot,
what
it's
you're
part
saying.
of an
Yeah,
endorsement.
so, okay, so
for
that,
airspace.
I understand the confusion, so, but you don't need the endorsement, there is something in there that says that if you've already got that, they basically wanna make sure you're trained, and the endorsement just shows that you're trained, but the practical test standards, or whatever they're using for the private pilot, would also have that in there, so that would show that you got trained. So you don't need a logbook, an additional logbook endorsement, and I think it does say that somewhere in there, but yeah, you wouldn't need that, you already have it.
And as I recall, as the rules changed when you were a private or a student pilot, you would get an endorsement for tower airports. And I believe you had to have an endorsement for, what was it, class B or Charlie? There was, depending upon when, for some of us, we had a ticket long before, but it did show up there that you had to get those endorsements along the way, for some of the later, more recent.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, kinda like the tail dragger endorsement showed up for a lot of folks, they had prior
Yeah.
experience, no endorsement needed.
That's
For
right.
us younger guys, we got our endorsement.
And I think there is something, I didn't put it up there, I think there's something that there's a grandfather rule about that as well. But like, let's take another, spin on that, let's say, you got a tail wheel, you don't have a tail wheel endorsement, but now you need one, no matter what. I mean, if it's something that you don't, let's say you don't have a high performance or a complex airplane endorsement on your private, which you might not, then you would need that before you can fly that particular airplane, okay, no matter what. Does that kind of make sense? Yeah. Okay, I'm not, sorry I'm not any better clear on that. Any other questions?
You can't fly complex.
Good.
Ed, is either the FAA or AOPA making any progress with the Canadians who get pilots that they submit to fly through Canada?
I'm not aware of any. Yeah, I don't know. You know the answer.
I can tag on to that. Adam White, spoke with him just like 2 weeks ago with that. He reached out to the fellows in Canada and they said that they're working on it, but with the state of affairs of the governments, the two governments, there's not an issue
Well, and I think the US does not recognize some of the Canadian stuff. They've got some, owner-maintained aircraft operations where you take a certified aircraft, no longer utilize it for commercial, you can maintain it without an AME and you can operate it privately, but the US won't allow those to fly through US airspace. And so the Canadians are wanting reciprocity on some of that stuff before they'll do the basic med into Canada.
Okay, see a lot of like stares. Is that it? I put you guys to sleep?
Yeah, great.
Okay. All right, well, thanks very much for, hopefully we'll see you in the next